Welcome back, everyone. It's Eric from Rare Candy. Here today we are back on the channel taking a look at another Darkness Ablaze deck profile for the post-rotation format. And today we're going to be taking a look at the new Salamence VMAX. Specifically, this is going to be the quote-unquote straight Salamence VMAX, or I've seen some people call it the ElectroMence variant as well. And we actually ran some polls across all of our social media kind of asking which variant they wanted to see of Salamence, and this wound up being the one across all of our platforms together. That one did wind up getting the most votes. But nevertheless, we do actually have a Welder-based version of this deck as well that's posted exclusively for our Stage 2 patrons at patreon.com/rarecandytcg. So if you guys are hungry for some more Salamence content, I have a link down below in the description to that as well. And also, too, if you want to see this particular deck in action, in the next day or so, we will have a video posted showing off the Salamence deck in action. So whenever that's posted, link will be down below in the description. So with that being said, though, let's hop into deck and see how this particular version of Salamence is going to look. So up first, of course, we have 4 copies of the new Salamence V here. Honestly, there's not really too much to say about this for this particular build of Salamence VMAX. We're going all in really on attacking with the VMAX. We don't really have a lot of great ways at powering this up. But realistically, maybe we can get off this first attack for 3 colorless energy. You do 30 to all of your opponent's Pokemon, so that's going to soften up some of them, maybe to set up some one-hit knockouts on future turns with your VMAX. But like I said, guys, we don't have a ton of energy acceleration in this particular style of deck, so more often than not, Salamence is basically just going to sit on your bench until you evolve. But yeah, so we have 4 copies of this. I think you could maybe cut down to 3, but I really think it's important getting a Salamence with a manual attachment on turn 1. That's why I am playing the 4 full count here. But going on, we have 3 copies, of course, of our main attacker. We have Salamence VMAX, new VMAX from Darkness Ablaze, 320 HP, 2 retreat, lightning weakness, etc. But it has 2 different attacks, the first of which, for a colorless energy, does 40 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. And then its second attack for 4 energy does 240, and you can't use that attack on your next turn. So both these attacks actually kind of synergize a little bit well together, especially against things like tag teams. In particular, the 40 snipe damage can set up some math to where your second attack can easily just clean up those knockouts if tag teams do still see play after the rotation. But one of the cool things about Salamence is the fact that it's a colorless based attacker, which means we have a lot of flexibility in terms of how we want to power this up, which even means we can use triple acceleration energy, which you'll see later in this deck list, to power up this second attack very, very easily. Even though this is a 4 energy attack, it's effectively really only a 2 energy attack in this list. So that is what we're going sort of all in on this deck. Between this first sniping attack and some other ways we have at increasing our damage output, we're actually sort of aiming to one-shot basically anything in the format, or at the very least clean up some knockouts after we use this 40 snipe attack. Going on from there, though, we have 3 copies of Jirachi in the deck as well. This is going to be our main consistency sort of boosting Pokemon we have. Of course, for that Stellar Wish ability, we can look at the top 5 cards of our deck, get a trainer card we find there, put it back into our hand, and Jirachi goes to sleep. And unfortunately, we aren't gonna be able to have access to something like a skateboard in the post-rotation format, but we're actually playing a pretty heavy scoop up net engine, so I do like Jirachi in this particular deck for that reason. Up next from there, though, we have Tapu Koko Prism Star, which is kind of our main form of energy acceleration, as weird as that sounds. Just because we do need 2 attachments to be able to power up a Salamence, and Koko is one way we can sort of cheat an extra attachment into play if we do need to power up a fresh Salamence, in a pinch. So of course, has that Dance of the Ancients ability. We can send Tapu Koko into the Lost Zone and attach a lightning energy from discard to 2 different Pokemon on the bench. So we're basically just playing lightning energy as our only basic energy in this deck. And for that reason, too, we are playing 1 copy of Zapdos. Zapdos, for just a single lightning energy, does 10 plus 70 more if it became your active this turn. And also, it's not affected by weakness. But yeah, so Zapdos is nice because it's a single attachment attacker, and the damage output from Zapdos actually works really well with the VMAX. So there's the 240 base damage without any other damage modifiers, plus the 80 here. That's going to one-shot most of the VMAXs that are in the format. So Zapdos, its damage, and the Salamence actually pairs really nicely. This is actually one of the techs I have in the deck right now for Decidueye as well. We have a very heavy scoop up net engine. So between our scoop up nets and the Zapdos and one of our other attackers we have in the deck, we can actually, I think, maybe be able to deal with the Decidueye decks if they do wind up popping up. Up next from there, though, we do have one copy of Hoopa in the deck as well. So Hoopa, this is going to be more for our Eternatus matchup, just because with the Evil Admonition, we can pretty easily soften up an Eternatus VMAX. So of course, just for a colorless energy, this 10 plus 20 more for each of your opponent's Pokemon that has an ability in play. So we are going to have to two-shot Eternatus more than likely, and Hoopa is going to be a great way at softening that up. But of course, Hoopa is just generally kind of good against other decks too, at getting in that chip damage, kind of like in the same way that Zapdos is. You know, they're going to have a Dedenne in play. They're going to have probably a Crobat in play. If they're playing a Jirachi engine, you know, this damage is going to sort of add up with this card. So it's just kind of another way that we can get in some of that soft damage before Salamence comes in and cleans up our knockouts for us. Does have another attack for 3 colorless energy, does 80, and it's not affected by weakness or resistance, but really, like I said, the main reason we're playing it is for that Evil Admonition attack. Next up from there, we have one copy of Oranguru. This is the one back from Sword and Shield. Just playing it for that Primate Wisdom ability, we get to replace a card in our hand with the top deck of our deck. So in this case, one of the issues we have right now in the current format, there's really not great special energy recovery. And our triple acceleration energies are kind of like gold in this deck. We really can't afford, I think, to discard them most of the time. You know, with certain exceptions, of course. But most of the time, I actually really want to protect those. And if we have to research our hand away or Dead change it away, I want to be able to protect those triple acceleration energies and make sure they don't get discarded. But even outside of that, you know, Oranguru is good at sort of like Marnie-proofing yourself against other matchups. But it's mainly to protect our triple acceleration energies specifically. And speaking of Dead change, we have one copy of Dedenne GX in the deck, of course. We discard our hand and draw 6. So just nice at digging on certain turns if maybe our supporter doesn't get us all the cards we need. And of course, we do have one copy of Crobat V in the deck for the same reason. Dedenne, while its ability is very strong, you can't use more than one of these in a given turn. So by playing Crobat V, you can kind of effectively get around that. Crobat, of course, you draw until you have 6 whenever you bench it. So a little bit different than Dedenne, and actually sometimes it's a little bit better because, like I said, special energies are something you don't really want to discard a lot of. And if you have a couple in hand, you might prefer something like Crobat over Dedenne on certain turns out there too. And to round out our Pokemon, we have 2 copies of Galarian Zigzagoon as well. So Galarian Zigzagoon is going to be one of the main ways we can augment our damage with this deck. Has that ability whenever we bench it from hand, we put a damage counter on one of our opponent's Pokemon. So between both of these and our scoop up nets, we can actually sort of push our damage output up to where it needs to be able to take these big one-hit knockouts. So again, between these, maybe even the snipe attack on Salamence VMAX, its cleanup attack is going to be able to pretty easily, I think, one-shot everything else from there on. Going on to our trainer cards, we have 4 copies of Professor's Research, and we, of course, also have 4 copies of Marnie as well. Very, very standard supporter count in this particular deck out there. Right now, I'm just going for just straight sort of consistency, just normal draw options. I think most of the time that's going to get us where we need to go. But of course, Research, discard your hand, draw 7. Marnie's a little bit more disruptive. Both players shuffle their hands, put them at the bottom of their deck. You get 5, your opponent gets 4. And then from there, to round out our supporters, we have 3 copies of Boss's Orders. This is like the most generic supporter count I think you could see in a deck, but I think it's going to do the job most of the time. So of course, the Boss Orders, we choose what we want to take knockouts on by switching our opponent's active with one of their bench. Up next from there, we have 2 copies of Viridian Forest in the deck. This is going to be our stadium of choice. The one reason I do like Viridian in particular over just playing more copies of Lightning Energy is because we can get it off of Stellar Wish. That's the big thing. You could play Energy Spinner as well for a similar reason, but by playing Viridian, that's going to give us a counter stadium, and also it's going to allow us to discard Lightning Energies if we need to be able to more easily use Koko as well. Going on to our items, we have 4 copies of Quick Ball, of course, to search out our basic Pokemon. The discard effect from the card also can be good at being able to toss Lightning Energies away to be able to use Koko. But we also do have 4 copies of Pokemon Communication in the deck as well. So Communication, it's one of the only ways right now that we can search out Salamence VMAX, because unfortunately the VMAX is not a basic, so we need another way at finding it. So with Communication, we put a Pokemon from hand back into our deck and get a different Pokemon. And we play a decent amount of Pokemon in this deck to where I think Communication is going to be live more often than not. And we also play Scoop Up Net, so Scoop Up Net in conjunction with Communication, I think makes this honestly a bit better than playing something like Evolution Incense. Up next from there, we have 4 copies of Switch in the deck as well. So we are playing a Jirachi engine, so we definitely need some ways at moving our Pokemon out of the active, but also too, with Salamence VMAX, preventing you from using its second attack on the following turn, we're going to need to be able to switch to the bench and reset that effect to be able to attack with it again. So we need a lot of mobility options in this deck. Speaking of which, we also have 4 copies of Scoop Up Net, as already kind of previously mentioned as well. Scoop Up Net, of course, is going to allow us to pick up a Pokemon that is a non-GX, non-V, put it into our hand, which is really nice for a couple Pokemon in here. It's great for Jirachi, great for Zigzagoon, also good for Pokemon communication whenever we want to use that as well. But between the 4 Scoop Up Nets, 4 Switch, we have a lot of ways of sort of maneuvering our board around and reusing these important abilities as well. And going on from there, we just have 1 copy of Air Balloon to round out our trainer cards here. Air Balloon, of course, is a tool card. It's going to reduce our retreat cost by 2. So with Salamence VMAX, we are going to need to switch. And then ideally, we want Air Balloon on a Pokemon and then just freely retreat back into Salamence. Or even Air Balloon can be a good target for Salamence as well, since it has a 2 retreat cost. We can maybe put Air Balloon down Salamence, retreat into Jirachi, maybe use Stellar Wish to get switched to be able to attack again. Just another way we can more easily maneuver around our board. But going on to our energy cards, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. We have 4 copies of Triple Acceleration Energy in the deck. Originally, I was playing kind of a lower count in here, but I quickly sort of discovered that I think you do need absolutely all 4 copies, especially if you prize any or unfortunately have to discard any at any point. So of course, they can only be attached to evolved Pokemon, which does include VMAX, and they provide 3 colorless energy, but gets discarded at the end of your turn. So it's going to be our main way at quickly powering up Salamence and doing big damage with its second attack. We also are playing 4 copies of the new powerful Colorless Energy. New card from Darkness Ablaze provides colorless energy, but when it's attached to colorless Pokemon, they do 20 more damage. Kind of like the old strong energy all the way back from Furious Fist, but just for colorless Pokemon. So this is really good at fixing our math in some instances, because let's say we put this on our Salamence, it's going to be hitting for 260 with its second attack. So 260 plus maybe a 60 snipe with the colorless energy on the active. That can sometimes knock out opposing VMAXs with 320 HP. And of course, the Zigzagoons can sort of come in and do sort of the remaining amount of damage that you might need to finish off some of these giant Pokemon. And then from there, to round out our deck list, we have 4 copies of Basic Lightning in the deck as well. Like I said, Koko is going to be our main form of energy acceleration sometimes. Let's say our only Salamence with any energy goes down, and we have another Salamence on the bench. We can, of course, accelerate some of these into play with Koko, then attach triple acceleration energy from there and be ready to go again. So that's going to be our attempt here at the straight Salamence, ElectroMence variant of this deck. Really not sure what to properly call this thing yet at this point. But there's definitely, I think, pros and cons between both this and the more traditional Welder one. I definitely think this version's much more consistent, but I think the big upside to the Welder one is that you actually have access to the base form Salamence's attacks. I think your energy costs are going to be a bit more flexible in terms of how you power them up. But like I said, the trade-off here is you have a bunch of consistency options. Being able to abuse Zigzagoon is also something I really like as well. So feel free to experiment with both. And like I said, guys, if you do want to see our take on the Welder variant, I will have a link down below in the description if you guys want to check out our Patreon and see if you want to access some of that content. But of course, guys, I hope you did still enjoy this deck profile today. Smack that like button. Feel free to subscribe. And also, if you can, consider supporting this channel, like I mentioned, by becoming a patron or by picking up some merch from our online store, rarecandytcg.com. It would mean a lot. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.